Joining us now, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors and former chief economist and economic policy advisor to Joe Biden, Jared Bernstein, co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Treyz, and Peter Hamby, who's back with us. So, Jared, is it insane that a socialist mayor was elected here in the capitalist capital of the world?
It's not insane, and in fact, it happened, and it happened by a pretty wide margin. Look, there is a long and mistaken view that what's good for Main Street, or should I say what's good for Elmhurst or Brooklyn Heights, is bad for Wall Street. If this mayor-elect, Mamdani, is able to chip away at the affordability problem, if he's able to make childcare affordable for many more New Yorkers, that's going to be good for the New York City economy. And that's not just me engaging in wishful thinking. There's a great deal of research that shows if people can afford to go to work, your labor force increases and you have positive productivity impacts. So this idea that making New York City more affordable, somehow it makes it a tougher place for the very wealthy to get by, I think is just fundamentally wrong. Another thing to recognize is that the affordability agenda is not the same as the anti-inequality agenda. Yes, Mamdani would like to raise more funds, but he can also support something like a child care program out of the budget as it exists. So I think there's a lot of room here for the city to improve on affordability grounds and the rich to be okay.
I wonder if the exodus out of New York is overblown or if it might happen. And Henrietta, I'll ask you about this. There is an open letter to New York business leaders from Florida saying, come here, it's great down here. There was a move for many hedge funders and bankers to move to Palm Beach during the pandemic. But still, I mean, the city has a lot of billionaires, has a lot of millionaires, has a lot of big companies based here. We offer a whole lot more than Florida or Texas or anyone else has in terms of culture and opportunity and dining and plays. I mean, it is one of the cultural capitals of the world. You can't copy it in other places. You can't find a lot of this in other places. So when these millionaires and billionaires are talking about fleeing New York if Zohran Mamdani wins, do you see that as hyperbole or potentially something that could happen?
I'm biased. I'm a New Yorker, so you don't need to convince me. I've already bought into that Kool-Aid. But I would say that a lot of these guys are my clients, and I've been working with them for 15, almost 20 years now. And the one thing that I admire most about hedge fund investors generally, is that they can adapt to anything. This year alone, they've adapted to $3.5 trillion in deficit increases, $4 trillion worth of tariffs, the firing of the Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner, the attempted firing of a Federal Reserve Board member, and the government's been shut down for 35 days and they've got no data to work with. They can adapt to all of this, and they can definitely adapt to Mamdani as mayor, particularly when you consider that they could elect somebody else for governor just in a couple months.
Yeah, and Peter, if they elect somebody else, say a Republican for governor, a lot of the proposals that Mamdani is offering will be much harder to get through, especially a tax hike.
They absolutely will. But I think you guys are right. The person in the White House has more influence over Wall Street than the mayor of New York. I mean, traders, whether you work in bonds or equities, like whether you're a VC person, like these issues aren't really managed by the mayor of New York City, and people want to live in New York. Katie, your point, I think, was one of the sharpest here. If you are from Connecticut and you go to Princeton and your whole life you've wanted to work on Wall Street and get a house in the Hamptons or Palm Beach, Zohran Mamdani is not going to impact that at all. And the people who run these banks, these companies, whatever they are, they need an employee base, and people want to live in New York City. And to Jared's point too, if they can make the affordability issue, if he can make the affordability issues in New York that much better, I think it lifts all boats. The question for Zohran Mamdani, though, is just he's barely winning 50% of the vote. There's a resistance to him in parts of the city that did not exist for previous Democratic nominees in the most recent cycles. Yes, it was a three-way race, but if Andrew Cuomo wasn't in the race, Eric Adams would still have been in it. So he's got to convince not just the business community, but also cops, various ethnic groups, unions. I mean, this is a hard job. And he said he had a mandate in this speech last night. I guess he has to flex coming into office, but there's going to be a lot of resistance to him from all corners of New York. And it's just a very difficult job. And he's got a lot to prove. And that doesn't take away from his campaign.
I think that's pretty accurate. Jared, you were talking about the child care proposal, making it cheaper. A lot of his proposals are going to cost a lot of money. Do you see them as feasible within the New York City structure?
I think they're feasible. I think they may need some adjustments to be implementable. Obviously, to the extent that he has to go to Albany, that's going to be a tougher lift for him. But again, as I mentioned, remember the New York City budget is well over $100 billion and has grown significantly over the years. I was impressed by one of the things he said in his acceptance speech was that he wants to cut bureaucratic bloat and that he's embraced some of what's typically called these days the abundance agenda, meaning trying to create more supply of necessary things that people want to afford, like housing, by taking away stale regulations. That's often considered more of a centrist play. So I think that the mayor-elect has shown real flexibility, real adaptability, willing to sit down and listen to anybody. He certainly sits down willingly with his critics, and he listens to them. So I think that his plans are feasible. And look, any good politician knows that you start with maybe a more extreme version of where you end. And if you have to make compromises along the way to get there, that's okay. So let's see what we get.
Peter, I want to bring this back around to what we started this show with, which is, can the Democratic Party be more than just one thing? Can it be more than just progressive? Can it be more even than just moderate? We've got some breaking news on this subject and on somebody that we mentioned. We talked about him. Maine Democratic Congressman Jared Golden just announced that he is not running for re-election. He wants to spend more time with his family. The former Marine also says the rise of political violence is another reason he's exiting the political ring. Golden writes in the Bangor Daily News, I have grown tired of the increasing incivility and plain nastiness that are now common from some elements of our American community, behavior that too often our political leaders exhibit themselves. And Peter, why this is important is that Golden represents Maine's 2nd congressional district. That is a very red district, one that Donald Trump won by 9 points in 2024. And in talking about the Democratic Party being open to candidates like him so that they can win those red districts, losing a candidate like him could be a very big deal for the balance of power.
Yeah, Jared Golden has always, and he won in 2018, but he's always felt like a candidate out of that 2004 to 2008 era Republican Party, winning in a district that Donald Trump won, and since 2024 has been held up as an example of just win baby moderates, as here's a guy who can do who can win in Trump areas. It's interesting he's retiring. I think he was held up as probably a future candidate in the state for statewide. He's being challenged by the left in his primary, so he's kind of being squeezed politically, Katie, in that Trump district. I don't know if that had an impact on his decision to drop out. I think a lot of people actually find this very surprising. I just heard about it from you, and I'm pretty shocked by this because he, did seem like he had a bright future in the party. But, I think candidates like that who have both stood up to Biden and Trump, that's exactly what Democrats need to do to win a large majority next year. So that's a tough one for Democrats to swallow.
And it was confusing that he would get a progressive challenger when he represents such a red plate. Why make it red place? Why make it harder for a Democrat to occupy that space and harder for the party to maintain a majority? All right, everyone, thank you so much. Jared Bernstein, Henrietta Trace, Peter Hamby, always good to have you.